Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky,
I'm Steven Zuber.
and today we have with us a special guest.
Hi, I'm Alexander Wales.
Hello, Alexander. We are going to be talking to Alexander today because he piqued my interest with something that I posted on Facebook, and I really wanted to get him in here and pick his brain on it. But before we get into that, we should, well, even actually before we do the Less Wrong post, we should give a quick intro to Alexander in case people did not hear the last episode that he was on. Alexander Wales, you are very well known for having written The Metropolitan Man, a bunch of other Rationalist fanfics, and who is currently writing the very popular Worth the Candle original fiction.
Yep, that's pretty much it. I live in Minnesota, stay-at-home dad. I was a software engineer for 7 years or so before I did that. Kind of burnt out on programming for a while, but that's as much of my life story as as you probably need. So
I was
Being burnt out on programming checks out.
yeah. I was originally planning on waiting until Worth the Candle was done before I started, but it just seems like that's a very, very bad plan at this point, and I should jump in sometime soon. What are you up to now, and how far in do you think you are?
it's at 1.3 million words, which is a lot.
Yes.
I think it's in the home stretch. I'm closing more threads than I'm opening, so that's I don't know. It's really hard to say, and I kind of try to let myself have some freedom to go do something weird with the story if I want to.
Yeah. Part of my apprehension about reading works in progress is that more than half the time that they're started, I've found that they just end before getting to the ending, that they're just abandoned. But like at this point, I am pretty damn confident you're going all the way, so I think I'm going to jump in here real soon.
Yeah.
And we have your email and can, hassle you, be like, what happens?
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're closing in on Wildbow length novel there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Worm was, I think, 1.6 million, and I'll probably hit that before the end.
Awesome.
Almost definitely, I think.
I wanted to mention too that Jace is just tardy. I'm not sure if something came up or whatever, but we didn't just not invite him. It's just scheduling conflict, I'm guessing. So if anyone's wondering, where's Jace, the voice of reason on the podcast? Well, he's busy.
We will soldier on without him and hope that things don't get too far afield.
Yes.
Alrighty, so as normal, we should start with the Less Wrong posts. And today we had Making History Available and, what was the last one? Stranger Than History. I think we actually forgot to announce this in last week's episode, so hopefully this isn't catching anyone too much by surprise. But let's get into Making History Available. Steven, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is where he introduces the concept or just where he mentions it again, but this is he opens with the fallacy of generalization from fictional evidence, which is one of my favorites. It's always fun to kind of point these out whenever they happen in the wild, like just with conversations with friends or something. And once you're aware that people are actually doing this, I think you might notice that it happens surprisingly often. I don't hear a lot of things involving Terminator necessarily, but which is what he brings up because that's, especially in 2007 was the main focal point for AI in movies. I'm really bad at summarizing. We can just...
It's amazing how much more AI there has been in movies over the past, I guess, 13 years now. Like Terminator at the time was my go-to example of what AI is, and now it's like not even in the top 5, I don't think.
Yeah, it's gotten a lot more mainstream, especially more, not necessarily realistic, but more nuanced takes on the idea in fiction especially. But when he talks about and it's not the point of the post necessarily, but the logical fallacy of generalization from fictional evidence, a lot of what people do is that they hear a story and they use that as like how they get a handle on a concept, and then that just kind of stays with them, even if the like fictional example doesn't apply in the real world.
Yeah, I love the term too, generalization from fictional evidence, and I think this is the first time it shows up in the sequences. I'm not actually sure because it's just become so ingrained in my vocabulary now. I don't know when I first saw it.
Yeah, same. I can't let this pass without just pointing out how much better I think a lot of uh, cinema, especially, does AI. Like, or cinema or TV or whatever. It's not really spoilery. There's AI stuff involved in the towards the end of the TV series Silicon Valley, which is a delightful comedy series about computer nerds trying to start a business, and uh, like it was perfect. I think that it did really really well. I even paused at a certain part to explain to my wife, like just to throw jargon at her, because I was like, oh my god, they're hinting at this thing. If you read Nick Bostrom's book, this would be the thing they're talking about. And I think they hit it right on the head. So yeah, things have gotten at least more. There's more variety to point to, but yeah, this post isn't just about introducing that concept. It talks about, as the title might suggest, like because some of us who are aware of the fallacy of generalizing from fictional evidence, like we have a propensity to not consider historical evidence as real evidence. And I think that, and he has this like line in there about how, like, what was it? Oh, in our ancestral environment, there were no movies. What you saw with your own eyes was true. Is it any wonder that fictions we see in lifelike moving pictures have too great an impact on us? Conversely, things that really happened, we encounter as ink on paper, and they happened, but we never saw them happen. We don't remember them happening to us. And so, like, I have memories from, watching movies or playing video games, especially where it kind of feels more like I'm doing these things. And none of that's real, but it's more readily available to my, like, did this happen bucket in my brain than stuff that I read on a page or heard someone talk about in a class, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I still have like some visceral memories of playing Soma and the experience at the end of that game, and it never actually happened to me, right? But it still like kind of emotionally feels like it did, that I went through that journey.
Yeah.
And that's, to be clear, this isn't to say that you can't take stuff from fiction. I think it'd be a complete misnomer to pretend that A, that's what this is saying, or B, that that's true.
Yeah.
Like you can even draw real life lessons from fiction. But the point is that you should be more inclined than we typically are to take real life lessons from things that really happened in our Earth's real history.
And he did say at one point that one of the reasons he wrote Methods of Rationality, well, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality, was because he wanted to find some way to give the experience of being rational and making these discoveries, and that wasn't just ink on paper like the sequences were, that were more like a memory and experience that people remember emotionally. And I think he did a pretty good job, but I'm biased.
Yeah, it's a lot of that post, he goes into like trying to get that feeling of having been there from history. Like when you read about history, trying to actually put yourself in the shoes of, the people who can seem very abstract and who I guess we can misunderstand fairly easily.
Yeah. He said that like it happened right after, in the last episode we talked about his mysterious answer he gave to a mysterious question, and how if he had lived through vitalism he would have recognized that was what was happening. And he said he reiterates that here, that he'd only read about that in books, but had it actually happened to him, if he had experienced it in the past and lived through those scientific revolutions, he would not have made that same mistake. And so now, this next part, like, I find a really interesting insight into his mind, because he has this whole thing where he says he should try to approximate the thoughts of an Eliezer who had lived through history. He should think as if everything he read in history books has actually happened to him. He says, why should I remember the Wright brothers' first flight? I was not there. But as a rationalist, could I dare to not remember when the event actually happened? I had to overcome the false amnesia of being born at a particular time. And he goes on to describe how he starts trying to form these memories that never actually happened to him, and it's really an interesting read.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to kind of concur that it's interesting and fun. And I mean, all these are short. Everyone should just be reading these too.
Yeah. I want to go ahead and pull out two more things near the bottom that he says he came to realize as he tried to picture himself actually living through all these historical events. He says, the modern world became fragile to my eyes. It was not the first modern world. He mentions this right after he describes living in a stable Roman Empire and then seeing it crumble and overrun by barbarians. So many mistakes made over and over and over again because I did not remember making them in every era I never lived. And to think, people sometimes wonder if overcoming bias is important. And then he admonishes everyone to remember things that they didn't actually live through. He says, remember how you had always thought that slavery was right and proper, and then you changed your mind. Don't imagine how you could have predicted the change, for that is amnesia. Remember that, in fact, you did not guess. Remember how, century after century, the world changed in ways you did not guess. Maybe then you will be less shocked by what happens next. So.
Yeah, I like it. And that transitions perfectly smoothly into Stranger Than History,
Yes.
which was the second post. And this is the one that, like, before we started recording, I'd mentioned that, like, if you knew nothing else about Eliezer Yudkowsky, I think you could at least get that he's a creative guy with a funny streak just by reading, like, the first 3 bullet points on this post. And so I'm going to go ahead and just read all 3 of them because I can't not. So it opens by saying, suppose I told you that I knew for a fact that the following statements were true. 1. If you paint yourself a certain exact color between blue and green, it will reverse the force of gravity on you and cause you to fall upward. 2. In the future, the sky will be filled by billions of floating black spheres. Each sphere will be larger than all the zeppelins that have ever existed put together. If you offer a sphere money, it will lower a male prostitute out of the sky on a bungee cord. 3. Your grandchildren will think it's not just foolish, but evil to put thieves in jail instead of just spanking them. You'd think that's crazy, right?
And I like that the next 3 that he puts out to contrast these because, like, you can see the one-to-one correlation between them. It says, now suppose it were the year 1901 and you had to choose between believing those statements I have just offered and believing statements like the following. 1. There's an absolute speed limit on how fast 2 objects can seem to be traveling relative to each other, which is exactly the speed of light in miles per hour. If you hop on board a train going almost this fast and fire a gun out the window, the fundamental units of length change around. So it looks to you like the bullet's speeding ahead of you, but other people see something different. Oh, and time changes around too. which is his correlation to the painting yourself an exact color will reverse gravity. It says, in the future, there will be a super-connected global network of billions of adding machines, each one which has more power than all the pre-1901 adding machines put together. One of the primary uses of this network will be to transport moving pictures of lesbian sex by pretending they are made out of numbers. Which, I want to pause real quick to say, remember in 2007 when the primary form of porn was lesbian sex? Boy, were we naive. And then finally, your grandchildren will think that it is not just foolish, but evil to say that someone should not be president of the United States because she is black. And I think this does like Stephen said, it very well ties into the previous post about pointing out just how weird the future can be and how hard it is to predict what's going to be happening because you haven't lived through all these sort of crazy revolutionary statements in the past, so you aren't prepared for a world that's going to change in such drastic ways. Like, I mean, if you were to compare any 2 of those statements, it's hard to say which one is more ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, then you just generate, like, actual future guesses that seem probable and they sound equally insane, which is like the hidden inference from this, right? In the future, people will be able to switch bodies depending on what they want to feel like looking like that day, and at a whim they can jump in and out of a Matrix-like simulation. That's something that I can see actually happening in the future, but that sounds just as insane as painting myself green and flying, right?
I've always kind of assumed, to get into slightly more fraught territory here, that in 3 Worlds Collide, the fiction he wrote, there's this one chapter where the protagonist mentioned that rape is legal now in the future. And there's a lot of implications in my mind in the story that what he's referring to as rape is different from what we think of as rape. But without getting into all that, I thought of this post the first time I read that, and I was like, maybe he's doing this thing where he's just trying to trying to make us understand how weirdly bizarre the future might be, that we can read that and like we are all shocked and appalled, but perhaps in the future that could actually be the truth, just the same way that we people 100 years from now, 100 years in the past, would think that it is shocking to say that it is evil that someone shouldn't be president if they're black.
Yeah, I wonder, like, I can't remember if, I mean, because I wasn't there, so I should remember, even though I wasn't because of amnesia. Um, if he invented the term weirdtopia, or if that was a TV tropes thing or some third source. But I think that's what he was going for there. Like, he wanted to stress that, look, if the future utopia is exactly like you think it would be, you're probably missing something. Or rather, a future utopia probably won't be just like you think it would be, because the odds of you being exactly right on everything are low.
Yeah, your future shouldn't just be an extrapolation of the present based on like trend lines that you can see coming.
Mm-hmm. So that's never what the future's actually going to be like.
Yeah, I think Charles Stross said that the future is like 90% totally mundane, normal stuff, and like 9% 9% just extrapolation of trends, and then like 1% total weird bug fuck stuff that you cannot predict whatsoever. And that's kind of his approach to world building for the future is like if you're writing something that's like 20 years in the future, there needs to be that element of just strange things that aren't not necessarily that aren't predictable, but that seem to people as though they came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, I kind of feel like it's pointless to try to write a true future, in part because, you know, it is so unpredictable, but also because we aren't writing for future audiences. Like, if you go back and read science fiction of the past, it's pretty obvious that it's, like, written for the audience of the time and how they think what is happening right now is going to affect the future. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, I think that's kind of legitimately the place of science fiction, to be like, what is the future that we are careening towards if other things don't change? And let's think about that for a while, despite the fact that we know well and very well that something crazy and drastic is going to change. But what can you do about that?
Yeah.
It's not like your audience is people of the future. They cannot buy your book.
Yeah. I think in some sense, partly science fiction authors ruminate on it a lot just because that's what they enjoy doing.
Yeah.
They like making their predictions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fun thing to do. But it's also partly just to give a bit of to like invest a bit of the zeitgeist into your work, and then also to add a little bit of realism by taking like current trends and extrapolating them out and trying to create a world that people will understand. But that kind of leaves you out on the weird, the like necessarily weird stuff that makes no sense to people from like 30 years ago.
I don't know. I could go on in science fiction at length because, man, I love that topic. But we don't have time for all that today. Is there anything more that either of you guys had about these two posts?
I think I'm good. I think talking about science fiction transitions semi-smoothly into talking about the stranger than fiction stuff that we're talking about here. Although that just sounded better than it actually ties in. So, stranger than real, maybe. Not quite. Whatever.
Before we get to that, I hate to fuck up your transition, or segue rather. Sorry,
No,
but we
please.
should mention
It was lost from the start.
We should mention the posts for next episode.
Of course.
Next episode, we will be reading and talking about Explain, Worship, Ignore, and Science as Curiosity Stopper.
Perfect.
Cool. All right. So, I mentioned that this got started on Facebook, which, I don't know. I still use Facebook because I am one of the olds, even though it is social media, and I probably shouldn't use it as much, but I cannot help myself. I still stay away from Twitter, so, you know, I am not the worst monster in the world.
At least Twitter, you can just filter by following exclusively comedians and scientists or whatever. I got on Facebook to set up the meetup that we're going to try and do this month, and like not only was it a cesspool for the 5 seconds that I had to look at the whatever dashboard, but like the UI was terrible. I was on like the beta for the new UI, and I eventually just finally figured out how to switch it back to the old one before finishing what I was trying to do. But I mean, if the content of Facebook didn't turn you off, the user experience of it should.
It's gotten a lot worse over the years. I've been using Facebook since 2004.
Oh,
when,
OG,
when it
basically.
required a .edu email address.
Yeah.
And the user experience has gotten a lot worse, and the people who have gotten onto Facebook have greatly reduced its utility. Plus, there's a lot of advertising, a lot of people getting into the game and ruining what was actually pretty decent when I was in college and it was just other college kids. Then it was mostly decent, but it's gotten so much worse over the years. I mostly use it for to share updates about fatherhood and my kid and just lighthearted stuff. I don't typically do political stuff. I filter out most people who do and most news sources, so it's like a heavily curated thing. But
I am honored that I did not hit your filter list.
not yet. No.
You're right. That's coming tomorrow.
Well, it's sort of a matter of how much I think there is to add. If because you can't fully filter, or you shouldn't fully filter by what you're seeing, I guess. But I had someone who the turn of phrase was living in accordance with the Constitution, and I was like, wow, like what do you even mean by that? Like the Constitution. Do you mean like in the spirit of the preamble, or in like the spirit of what the founding fathers meant? Or
it sounds like a weird take on biblical
religious,
living.
Yeah, it was a religious phrase being borrowed to what's a document that details the limitations of the federal government against the states, right?
So what was
it was, I don't know, it was one of those people who has not thought very deeply about things and did not know very much history, because I'm like, the argument was in terms of freedom of expression, right? Specifically with regards to whether or not she should be mandated to wear a mask. And it's just like the Constitution says that your free expression should not be infringed, and I'm like, okay, but like, first of all, that was only for the federal government when it was originally written, right? That was not, the Bill of Rights was not applied to the states for I don't know, like 100 and some years. Second, like if you read the Federalist Papers, they make that argument that it is necessary to give up liberty in order to have safety, right? And third, if you go to look at the Supreme Court cases that have been decided, there are limitations to liberty in order to ensure the public safety. And that's always been kind of an essential American debate, because Americans place so much emphasis on liberty. But you can go through and you can read Supreme Court cases. It's been established law for quite a while that there are concerns of public safety where your basically the bounds of liberty are not absolute from the government, which should be obvious because the government collects taxes, right? Among many other things that the government does that infringe upon your liberty. The court case I cited specifically was a vaccination one. It was a 1905 one where they're basically like, yeah, a state can enforce vaccination orders for the public good, and your liberty does not extend so far that you can just endanger other people by not getting vaccinated. And she did not like that, and then I blocked her.
I mean, the vaccination
that is the story of that drama, but...
Well, I mean, it sounds like the vaccination one was a much better example than the facetious one I was going to come up with, which is like, it constrains my liberty to say to tell me which side of the road I can drive on, and yet if you catch me driving on the left side of the road, I should be pulled over and given a ticket, if not have my license taken away. And I think that's right and proper, because I'm a good, I don't know what you call it. Who's the person who wants to roll over and give up their liberties? Yeah, I'm a good bootlicker of the government, and I think that if they catch me driving on the wrong side of the street, they should give me a ticket, or at least tell me not to. And I mean, my other facetious point is that like the founding fathers didn't know what a germ was, so like they didn't have an opinion on wearing masks to prevent the spreading of disease. Now, obviously, that's not the case they were making. They were your your interlocutor on Facebook, but
Yeah. Actually, George Washington did mandate vaccines for the Continental Army, just because sickness killed so many people, and they had a really crappy smallpox vaccine that was like, you take scabs from someone who has smallpox, and you like crush them up into a powder, and then you dip a wet needle in that powder, and you poke a healthy person with it. That was what they did for vaccines back during the Revolutionary War.
yeah, I mean, and that sounds crazy now, but that's actually, given the technology available, a really innovative solution.
Yeah, and that it gives you a very mild form. I think it was smallpox, but it gives you a very, very mild form of it. There's still, there's still a fatality rate associated with it even.
Yeah, I think it was 2 or 3%.
Yeah, and they chose to do it anyway.
Yeah, because it was lower than if it went rampant. Yeah,
because war conditions, especially, a disease can just rip through the barracks so quickly. But yeah, so that's another point in favor of giving up a little liberty, right? Yeah. I don't know. I think that there's debate to be had about the balance of liberty and safety, right? But to say that there's an absolute liberty that comes from the Constitution, especially that part where it's like, this is about the Constitution. It's not about like natural rights, right? It's an appeal to the Constitution rather than anything. That, I don't know. That's just like, it gets to me, and then I spend too much time on like Facebook posts that are just like, I made the mistake of going to my local news, their Facebook thing, because a thing showed up, and then I expanded the comments, and that was my problem.
You read the comments.
Like, yeah, well, and it's my natural inclination to try to correct people when there's misinformation, like I'll go track down a source and, say what I believe to be the truth, and that's not gotten me too great of results, I don't think, in terms of it like changing anyone's mind. But I would rather that I do that. It eats up time for no real purpose, I guess. That's just
and as
a personal flaw, I guess.
As collateral damage, you might end up helping somebody, get a better picture of stuff. So that's not a bad thing. And I should mention too, since you don't know me as well as Inyash, and maybe our listeners have heard me make this joke enough, like I'm not besmirching Facebook like users that they shouldn't be doing it. I'm more talking about my own dispositions, and that I don't have the gumption to face it. It's not like I think anyone who uses Facebook is doing something stupid. I realized a few minutes ago that what I'd said may have come off that way, and I didn't mean it that way. So
no, I think that there are a lot of good arguments for getting off social media in general. Twitter especially. I think Facebook is a little more amenable to curation, and then Reddit is you can sequester yourself into a community and that community has like actual control in a way that is better than the absolute free-for-all of Twitter, especially. It's just...
And Twitter, it's just made up of small, out-of-context bullets that are flung around, whereas with Reddit especially, God, I love Reddit. You can have long conversations that are threaded, or you can quote and reply people. It's really ideal. I wish Reddit was more popular, but I guess that's the whole thing. Social media is optimized to spread itself, and the best way to spread itself is to enrage and trigger people and just inflame things as much as possible. So the more reasonable and rational, if I dare say, a forum is, the less popular it will be overall, because that's just not how these things multiply.
Yeah, and I think speed is another big factor that really hurts Twitter, is that a lot of it is near real time. Mm-hmm. And so I have this problem with Discord, is that you, like, let's say you're having a conversation with someone, and they say something, and you're like, is that true? And then you go try to find a source. And that can take some time. And by the time you come back, the conversation's over.
Oh, yeah.
And if you, like, finally print, it's like, no, you're misquoting this source, or you misunderstood this, or whatever. If they did, sometimes I go to look things up, and it turns out I'm wrong. But you come back, and conversations moved on. No one cares anymore. It's just you left to go educate yourself, and I think it gives a real disincentive for doing any like homework, investigation, or deep thought on anything. It's just whoever can type the fastest. That's not the full of it, but that's a lot of my problem with Discord and a lot of other chat applications, is it being in real time really hurts fact checking and deeper thought and trying to unravel things, because you can just hit an avalanche of conversation and everyone moves on. And Twitter, in my experience, has been a lot like that too, because the average outrage on Twitter lasts a day, maybe, for like a handful of days for the bigger stuff. But there's a great Mark Twain quote.
The lie can get halfway around the world before the truth can put on its pants.
Yeah, it's something to that effect. But yeah, it's there. I think about that a lot in the context of social media, because it's much more true now than it was in Mark Twain's time.
Yeah. Well, that brings us basically exactly to what I wanted to talk to you about, because the uncharitable way to put this is that it seemed to me like you said you were thinking the best way to combat lies is with stricter censorship, and I thought that was really a very bad idea. I guess the quote, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but my idea was the standard liberal philosophy of you defeat bad ideas by exposure and argument and persuasion, and all censorship does is decide who has the most power, and they can silence their opposition, whereas having this open argument and debate will let people who are actually correct rise to the top. So in that effect, the pressure in one regime is to be as powerful as possible regardless of the cost, whereas the pressure in the other regime is to have the thing that is closest to the truth. And the way you said to me is that this idea that the way to defeat bad ideas is by exposure, argument, and persuasion is absolutely not the lesson of the last few decades of public discourse.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you know the subreddit "Who Would Win"?
I do not. I love it. One of my favorites.
There's a subreddit called "Who Would Win," and you just almost all the posts are of some variety of who would win, the Hulk or Superman, right? And before you can answer that question, and in this case the question is who would win, truth or lies, right? Before you can answer that question, you have to set some boundaries on like what version of the Hulk are you talking about, what version of Superman. And it's my belief that depending on the circumstances, and I personally think the circumstances right now are very ripe for it, lies will win over truth. I think especially with social media being one of the dominant methods of discourse, lies will win over the truth just because people don't do their fact checking, because a lot of open discourse is not actually open discourse. A lot of how people get their information is selective, and we don't actually have that open discourse and that like charitable dialogue that it would be great if we did have. And so my belief in the power of truth to prevail over the power of lies is basically that truth does not have what it takes at the moment.
Well, I agree with you that social media is currently an absolutely terrible place for this, and maybe forever systematically a terrible place for this. But I don't think that the way to win that is to give in and follow their rules and find out who can form the largest screaming Twitter mob. It's to stick by the principles of you guys are just a screaming Twitter mob, and once you can have a recent debate, come back and talk with us, and in the meantime we will continue putting forward these reasoned positions and evidence and whatever, and we won't censor you guys and you don't censor us.
Well, okay, so I don't think it's just social media, and I don't think it's just Twitter mobs. I think a lot of the problem comes from people who have platforms and how they choose to use those platforms, right? So the anti-vax stuff started in like 1998. There's a guy named Andrew Wakefield who was a British physician, and he put out this paper that got into the Lancet, which was about a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. And over the next few years, it didn't replicate. It was found out that he had some really pretty serious conflicts of interest. He had taken 400,000 pounds from a legal group that was attempting to litigate against the MMR vaccine. He took that money like 2 years before he published his study, and never disclosed it. It came out after some investigation, and he had filed a libel lawsuit, and it came out during discovery, I think. And he was thoroughly discredited, and there were co-authors that pulled their names from it. He was claiming it was, silencing of science or whatever. He lost his libel lawsuit and had to pay for legal fees of the defendants. It was basically never replicated, was strongly repudiated by every medical institution, right?
It's straight up fraud.
Yeah, and also a lot of the data was fraud. A lot of the people selected for the study were brought to him by the same legal team that was going to do this litigation on MMR, right? It was probably one of the biggest examples of academic fraud and misconduct, like probably in the last 30 years. Anyway.
Biggest one of the modern day.
Yeah. So 2007, Jenny McCarthy comes on Oprah and starts talking about how vaccines cause autism, right? And Oprah never talks back about that. Oprah never said, hey, I don't think any of this is true. I don't know if Oprah didn't have fact checkers or didn't know what Jenny McCarthy was going to talk about, whatever. Anyway, 2007 is basically the birth of the anti-vax movement, right? Jenny McCarthy has said that, she got her degree in the College of Google. So anti-vax movement starts, and now we have fairly regular outbreaks of these diseases that were, basically eradicated. Because Oprah, it's for a lot of reasons, but you can kind of look at these chains of people saying things that are clearly false, and these false things, they get their foothold in, and then they cause real damage in the real world, right? That is, when I'm looking at the failures of the truth to beat the lies, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at things that are like that. That's one example out of a lot, but sometimes people are motivated in their deceit, and sometimes it's just biases, I guess. The things that are not the truth. There's something you said that was basically that the truth has one big advantage, which is that it's true, right? And you can go out and you can verify in the real world. The problem with that is that sometimes you can't go out and verify it, right? Like for myself, I can't go out and personally verify whether MMR causes autism. I don't have children that I can inject with an MMR vaccine.
You don't have 30 kids for a randomized controlled trial.
Right. I can't do that trial on my own. I would never get permission to do it. I don't have access to the data. I might be able to get the data, but even then I'm not a scientist. I don't know enough that I could write my own study and trust it. I know enough about myself to know that I can't do those things. There's some people who disagree, who think that if they have access to the data, they can just make their own conclusions from it. I am skeptical of that for a number of reasons, because it's failed for a lot of people in the past trying to do that. Right. But that's the kind of thing that, I can't empirically verify a lot of facts. Most facts, almost, right? And
so I want to interject here to say that I agree with you first that the anti-vaxxers are horribly misinformed, to put it very charitably, and are responsible for a lot of misery and death. But on the other hand, what would you have done that was different from how things were done? Because almost any intervention I can see that that would limit people's ability to speak would have even worse consequences than what we have right now.
Well, it depends. It depends on where you made your intervention, right? What Google does now for a couple different things, but Google, for certain things, if you Google them, you'll get, instead of the normal top result or instead of an ad or something, they'll direct you to pages of information, right? There's also, the Lancet publishing that they were like, oh, we never would have published it if we'd known about these, conflicts of interest that weren't disclosed, like these multiple different conflicts of interest. And I think the replication crisis in a lot of scientific fields is an indication that a lot of people just have not been doing their work as far as peer review goes.
Yes,
right.
Well, but hold on.
And there are a lot of systemic problems there that you could solve that would also solve some of these things. There are things that could have been done differently, and that were, these are problems that were known about for quite a while, and then there's structural issues, and no one really has the incentive to fix them, and so
yeah, but
the only way to, I don't know that intervention helps.
Oh, okay. Well, I was about to say that's just Google pointing people at the truth, but okay, you're saying that doesn't help.
No, Google pointing out people to the truth, I think, does help.
Oh, okay.
I think that having, Google also will hide results. That, I don't know if you want to call that censorship. I don't know that I would call that censorship. I certainly don't know what you think about it, but I don't know that I would call that censorship, because it is in a sense, because people go to Google and they ask Google for results back, and they maybe foolishly expect those results to be unbiased,
Google has lost a lot of credibility in my eyes over the past year because of how they implement their algorithm and how they massage what you see. Lots of times, usually if I'm Googling something, I am searching for the same thing everyone else is searching for when they Google those words. And so Google assuming that is a thing that saves me some time, but I don't want it to make that assumption, because there's other times when what I'm searching for is actually what I really wanted to search for, and Google assuming that 99% of everyone else who searched for these terms found this and wanted to see this, he must want the same thing, is not accurate, and screw you guys for trying to make that decision for me. So I'm trying to switch over to DuckDuckGo more and more, but the thing with Google is if it's intentionally hiding results for someone that specifically searched for something, then yes, I would consider that censorship. If it's more like putting the truth at the top of the list, then that's more of a nudge than a censorship, and I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah. A lot of what they do, they have their own custom cards that they make that aren't a source that they're pointing to. Mm-hmm. I know they do that did that recently for COVID, where they don't actually even point you at a source as the first thing. They just give you the information that you want. They do that for a lot of things. But that is one of those things that probably helps prevent the spread of misinformation. If you just have the full accurate information at the top. I know they started doing that recently for climate change on YouTube, where if you go to any video that's flagged as talking about climate change, below the video they'll have their own hey, here's what you actually need to know.
Interesting.
They don't remove the videos, but they do put their own basically the stock counter argument for anything that you're going to find. They put that below the video, which I think is also helpful and more in the direction of open debate, right?
Well, I mean,
because
I want to backtrack just a little bit. With the anti-vaxxers, would you have recommended that Jenny McCarthy be silenced somehow, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How?
I mean, well, in one of the ways that you can do it is to not silence, you don't put a muzzle on her, but you make it so that there are disincentives for people to spread misinformation, right?
You also don't invite her on Oprah.
Right.
Well,
but
Oprah
I
made
would've
skeptoids number one place in the top 10 list of harmful promoters of pseudoscience.
Yeah, but that Oprah is Oprah. Are we going to make a law that says the government has to vet all Oprah guests first?
No, I mean, you do it post facto. You do it after the fact if there's something that gets brought to the attention of whoever that I mean, that's how a lot of our laws for that are. We have a lot of laws that are against free speech, right? Or that are against some defined things that are not covered under free speech. And I'm not even necessarily talking about. I mean, okay, so there's the government, and then there are private entities. Like those are different forms of censorship, but Twitter does have the power to enact censorship, right? Outside of any legal framework.
Right.
It can just silence people if it wants to. The only thing preventing it from doing that are market considerations and possibly legal considerations if they're suddenly classified as a publisher instead of a platform, which would have legal consequences and stuff. But legally speaking, like, you aren't allowed to yell fire in a crowded theater. You are not allowed to incite violence. You aren't allowed to defame people. I know there's 4 of them, but we have existing laws preventing people from speech which goes too far in whatever regard, right? So I don't think that, most of them are post facto though, right? You're allowed to defame someone, you just have consequences for that. It's not that, I mean, I guess you can get an injunction against something that's defamatory, but usually it's after the fact instead of before the fact, which is a lesser form of censorship in my eyes, because you're not silencing someone.
But there's some sort of due process
Preemptively.
where we decide if something is so damaging to the public good that it has to be prevented from being said, right?
Yeah. There is due process, and
Well, I mean, that's the
Twitter-
thing, though. There isn't due process in a lot of the public discourse. There is just wild accusations and mobs, and that is what I'm against. If there was due process, like someone having to actually take someone to court, maybe Jenny McCarthy, maybe whoever it is that they want to get canceled, and show some evidence, I would not have nearly the same problem with the way things have been going. It's much more the fact that a passionate accusation of harm can get almost anything silenced if the person making
Right.
the accusation is popular enough.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily popular enough, because a lot of the calls for cancellation don't come from like hugely influential people. They just kind of snowball through Twitter and then smack into someone.
Sure.
The problem with that is that that's a consequence of free speech, right? Like, I mean, to some extent that's covered under like defamation, but trying to put out a defamation lawsuit against some rando on Twitter, I don't think you're going to get very far with that.
No, right. I mean, that is a consequence of free speech, which is why I prefer to fight it with more free speech, such as what initially started all this was the Harper's letter saying that there's too much of this shit going around and people should take a greater, stronger stand against it. And that is the kind of fighting back to it that I am in favor of, as opposed to like literally trying to stop people through the force of law from forming these mobs.
Well, I just don't think you're gonna. I mean, you're not gonna be able to stop them through the force of law, because the law has a hard time reaching through the internet, right? Most of these people are not in the same state or even the same country, and trying to like, you're not gonna be able to do it through the force of law. You might be able to do it through the force of Twitter corporate.
Well, then shouldn't you maybe be on my side with the whole, we should fight back using our own social pressure and standing by the principles of stop trying to shut down discourse and cancel people?
It depends on what you mean by shutting down discourse. There are, I mean, like anti-vax, right? I would love if you could argue with those people, get them to change their mind, convince them that it was correct to vaccinate their kids, and then have them vaccinate their kids, and then there's less illness and death, right? I just don't think that's realistic. I mean, I don't think it's worked so far. I know a lot of people have tried. So at some point, you need to either have algorithmic interventions to make sure that stuff is at least not being promoted by these dumb algorithms that are in place that are just trying to drive engagement, right? Or you do the thing that YouTube does, you do automatic title cards or automatic information that at least will maybe try to drive people to the right source and automate the process of arguing, which is honestly, if you've ever argued with an anti-vaxxer, the big problem is it just takes so much time for so little gain. You know, one of my problems with open discourse is that, first of all, I don't know, people are big balls of bias, right? And it is very hard. You have to approach them with empathy and like try to see it from their point of view, try to like model their world and present what evidence you can, but evidence is not really that powerful of a thing for a lot of people, you know? But so, you know, when we're talking about things that like Twitter could do as opposed to things that the law could do, Twitter could do more than it's doing to, you know, I mean, people are literally dying because of the anti-vax stuff. That's not, I mean, there are a number of scientific studies about the impact of the anti-vax movement, right? In terms of like how many fewer people have been vaccinated since certain events have happened, like trying to track vaccination rates and then trying to track actual outbreaks and stuff like that. That's a real thing that happens. And to just say that, you know, Twitter should let those people speak, that should try to make sure that its algorithm is unbiased. Like, I would love if Twitter were biased in the direction of the truth. I would love if all our social media were biased in the direction of open debate and clear communication and authoritative sources. I don't know. It's just not. It's not where it is. It's not where we're at right now, which is why I don't think I don't have a lot of faith in the truth to win out. Right.
Well, it seems to me that you're obviously very fixated on the anti-vax thing, and I know you have a young child, so probably rightly so. But well, actually, I don't even know if your child's young anymore. God knows how many years it's been.
Yep, he's 4 years old. He's right in the age range where measles, rubella, and mumps would be really bad.
Okay.
But it's not even necessarily the anti-vax things. I mean, we could talk about other stuff that's just relatively politically neutral, right? There is a lot of misinformation, a lot of it very motivated by...
No, I mean, the thing is, like, I agree with you that anti-vax is bad, and you have more of a personal stake than I do, so I don't want to come off sounding callous about this, and I apologize beforehand if I do. But I am worried that the proposed solution is, in the long term, worse than the cure would be. Because while right now you may be only censoring the anti-vax people and saving lives because of it, once you've implemented this policy of people who have decided they know the truth and have the power to censor people not only can but should do so for society's own good, right now that's fine. Give it 100 years and you might be back into the position of the church, who knew what was actually good for people and was censoring things like whether the earth traveled around the sun or not.
Yeah. Well, that's a slippery slope. The question is whether the slope is actually slippery, right? I am in favor of certain instances of Twitter and to a lesser extent the government, right? Because Twitter's a corporate entity, and
well, but do you think
if people don't want to use Twitter, they can just not use Twitter?
Yeah,
you know.
But do you think it would literally apply only to the anti-vax case and nothing else ever?
No. I think it applies to other things. I think that it is a matter of degree, right? I'm okay with certain examples of it, of censoring things that cause direct harm. It's just a question of what the litmus test is, and it's a question of to what degree it's allowed. Now, I think that is a reasonable concern, to think that you start allowing it for one thing, you're going to start allowing it for other things, the rule's going to start creeping up, there'll be like pressure to just censor all dissenting voices. I think that's a reasonable concern. I just don't think that's necessarily the outcome.
I think it's also like realistic to like expect censorship to have like, and I've been mostly silent just because I'm enjoying the conversation. So, like a while ago, Eneasz mentioned about how Google won't return results sometimes. Now that counts as censorship, but that doesn't strike me as like a necessarily bad thing. I wouldn't want it to be Googleable. You know, okay, Google, how do I build a chemical bomb out of stuff I can buy at Safeway? Like, I want that to come up with nothing, because I don't want people who would use that information to have it, right?
What if you need that information to fight off the Nazis?
That's a risk I'm seriously willing to take.
Okay.
Like, given that I can still buy a gun, and I think that'd probably be more effective than throwing a whatever chlorine gas bomb at Nazis. Maybe we could have a caveat that in the event of a full-on invasion, whether it be from zombie Nazis or aliens, all the search engine firewalls come down, and anyone can Google whatever they want. But like, is that something that you would find A, is that kind of censorship, and B, is that objectionable? Or do you think that no, as an American, I have a right, or as a human or whatever, I have a right to Google whatever dangerous knowledge I want, and Google should deliver that to me?
Is the same at me?
Yeah, I think you were the one who's coming off as anti-censorship.
Yes. When it comes to things like the ability to make weapons, obviously at some point we need to draw some sort of line. Like, it's not that difficult to gather the materials you need over a course of a year to make a dirty bomb. The quote unquote radioactive Boy Scout started doing that sort of thing, and I'm not sure that's the best idea to have that knowledge easily available. And the more extreme and dangerous these things get, the more likely it is that we should make it hard to get this information. But it's not like the knowledge to make basic fertilizer bombs isn't already out there. It's relatively easy to find.
Yeah, I mean, just like it's relatively easy to find whatever. And I like the anti-vax example, not just because it's might be salient for one of the speakers, but it's like it's a good, nice example. It has history, it has trackable data. COVID would be another really good example, but we don't have 15 years of data on where all the bullshit around that is going to take us. Like, in fact, you mentioned like the badges on YouTube and on Google. Twitter's doing that for some stuff. I'm not on Twitter. I was on there briefly for like the summer of 2012 and just didn't find the platform useful. But it came to my attention that, if say somebody like the president tweets mail-in ballots will destroy democracy and there's tons of fraud, there will be a little badge underneath every reply, or rather beneath the tweet above every reply that says, here are the facts, or click here to get the facts on mail-in ballots. If he says that, COVID's made up, or whatever, Kung flu is a democratic hoax, then there will be a badge that shows up underneath that says, click here to get the straight business on COVID.
Wait, is Kung flu another term for COVID now?
Oh, you don't watch his rallies?
It's one that Trump uses. Yeah.
Holy shit.
That's a term he uses for it.
Yeah, if you want an aneurysm, watch his rally in Oklahoma that he did last month.
I'd rather not.
Oh man, I've watched so many Trump rallies. They are just they're mildly tolerable in some sense if he's working off a teleprompter, but he's usually not.
If there was some sort of due process to decide what to get censored, I would be much more okay with that. Like if we decide that, by we I mean the government, society in general, that decides that the knowledge of how to build an atomic bomb should be a state secret, then at least that's a policy that is out in the open and everyone knows about. Like Germany has a strong censorship policy about Nazi stuff, and we would consider that impinging on our rights because it is very much censorship of free speech. But I think that they have a special case in their country why they want to do that, and since it's a matter of known public policy, it's much more reasonable than if it was just being randomly determined by whoever happened to hold the reins of power in some arbitrary position.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I like Twitter mobs as much as the next person, but I'm skeptical of the hope that a due process judgment on what gets censored would be at all desirable. I'd rather have it be the mob, or rather have it be the CEO of Twitter, because I mean, just imagine if you get enough of the House, enough of Congress, and the president to all sign off on say, no, you know what, we're going to say that windmills cause cancer, and that is the new truth. Anyone who tries to correct that, they get silenced. Like, that could pass the due process because they have the votes.
Right. No, yes, but the point that I'm trying to get to is that I think we might be slightly talking past each other, because it never even gets up to the position of the CEO of Twitter, is what I'm saying. It's someone, what was the latest example?
Well,
Some Navy guy in 1983 wrote something about women shouldn't be in combat, and someone discovered it online, and they target his employers because people have discovered that employment is the soft underbelly in the U.S. You can't live without someone providing your health care through your job. They target his employers. Now he doesn't have a job. Now he's possibly unemployable. And there was no decision made by any CEO at Twitter or any sort of decision-making process at all. It was just an angry mob on Twitter pushing pressure on a guy's employer, and now he's fucked. And like, the Harper's letter is the sort of thing that says, this is bad, we should stop doing it, and we should be angry at people who do it, rather than a direct statement on government censorship or things along those lines.
Okay, I was thinking along the lines of, like, what comes back when you Google stuff.
Well, I think that there are different aspects to it, and I think that, yes, Twitter mobs suck. I just don't think the Harper's letter is going to do anything. I think people have been talking about the evils of cancel culture far before it was, a recognized thing, right? And I don't think it's part of what irks me about the Harper's letter is that it's like pretending that that's a thing that the left does, right? Is cancel culture is a problem of the left, and in no other way does anyone else do it, right? That's not the case.
That is not the impression I got, because I think both sides do it. I personally think it's more egregious when the left does it, because we used to be the side that was standing up against that sort of thing, but I don't think it's just a problem on the left.
Yeah, all of their examples were on the left, right? All their examples that were in the Harper's letter, they were not. They were examples of the left doing it. That's
I rushed to point out there were no actual examples in the Harper letter. It was intentionally vague.
It was intentionally vague and trying to allude to certain things that had happened. Would you agree that it was alluding to things that had happened, even if it didn't specifically cite those things?
I would definitely say there were some allusions, but the allusions were broad enough that you could apply them to things that happened on the right as well. It's just that the ones that have happened on the left recently are more salient to recent memory.
Well, the other thing that irked me about it was I thought they were very weaselly in doing that.
Oh.
I thought that was a weasel's way of just being like, hey, we could be talking about anyone, and that's in a way that wasn't helpful. Because if we're looking at specific examples, I think we can make better judgments, and I think we can have arguments about them. But if those are not specific examples, if those are just allusions that you can use to like slip out of any concrete discussion, I just found that really annoying just when reading it.
Okay.
But it's a problem everywhere, basically. I don't know how involved you were in Gamergate.
I was strongly aware of Gamergate, but I did not partake.
It was a huge thing, and that's to me the thing that is now called cancel culture.
Oh yeah.
These harassment campaigns, these like dredging up, sometimes hacked emails.
Yeah, it was disgusting from the very beginning. It was like someone had a shitty breakup, and all of a sudden the entire world has to be in on it.
I'm happy to go on the record as saying that I somehow completely missed all of it when it was happening, and only have the vaguest outline. In fact, if you'd asked me what is Gamergate, I would say it was something that happened in the mid-2010s, I think, that involved video games. I know literally nothing beyond that, and I'm kind of okay with that.
The super short cleaned up version is that there was a game developer who was dating a game journalist, and they had a bad breakup, and the developer brought it to Twitter and basically just shat on their ex-partner, and it turned into a whole, there's no truth in gaming journalism, they're all like sleeping with people for the clicks or such. It was crazy misogynistic bullshit over something that completely irrelevant to actual gaming. Like, gaming journalism has never at all been anything that is objective. It's all about giving AAA ratings to the AAA games, and maybe every now and then you'll see an indie game mentioned. But like, if it came from Bungie, you know they're going to give it a 10 out of 10 and drool all over it.
Yeah. Well, the point being that a lot of that stuff was my first real exposure to not to the Twitter mob.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't even think Twitter was Twitter was not as big then as it is now, but I just don't see something like the Harper's letter actually helping or being a good approach, because I don't think that this is like, I don't think that first of all, I don't think individual members of the mob are probably even going to read it. I think most people don't read articles; they just read headlines or tweets. That's a problem of our time, is that people just, oh my god, one of the things I hate the most about Reddit is that if you go to any of the big subreddits, you get all these comments, and then people are like, "Did you not read the article?" It's like, "Oh, it's Reddit. We didn't read the article."
Yeah.
It's like it's
your,
so
your question
ubiquitous that it's a meme.
Yeah, your question was answered in the article that you did not read.
Yeah.
or your comment was explicitly refuted in the article that you did not read. First of all, I don't think anyone's going to read the Harper letter that, is in control of this mob, because no one is in control of the mob, right?
Yeah.
And the mob is the mob because it's just birds engaging in this flocking behavior. And I don't think that during Gamergate it would have helped to be like, hey, this is shitty behavior. Please don't do it.
Right.
It'd be better for all of us if you weren't shitty to these people.
Yeah. No, I agree. You're not going to stop the mob from being shitty to people, but the point of the Harper's letter is to put more pressure on elites and employers to not cave into the mob.
I think that's also, it's very hard to get someone to take a principled stand when it costs them, which is usually why the people cave in, right? It's a lot of these institutions, just the way capitalism works, where people are running really, really close to the line of profitability, and they can't take losing a whole bunch of subscribers or losing advertisers. Like, that, if it's a choice between having to lay a bunch of people off to take a principled stand in favor of like due process or something, it's just not something most organizations are going to do.
Yeah, but
especially because of all the work that has been done over the past however many decades of trying to get states to do like no fault, it's at will employment, right? Yeah. That's another big problem with it is, your work can fire you for whatever reason it wants, and as soon as you start losing your work money, they kind of have to fire you.
But I think that's the purpose of the Harper letter and other similar movements that are starting now is to, first of all, give people the impression that if you do stand up for your principles, there are good people who are, well known enough to be asked to sign an open letter, large public figures that are on your side, and that maybe you will not lose as much business, and we're trying to turn this thing around. Like, it's not going to make a huge difference overnight, and it's certainly not going to stop the Twitter mob, but if a lot of employers see that a lot of other employers are also taking the stand, together they can, over time, create a united front. Like, that's the purpose this is building towards, and to, in my opinion, to like tear it down at the very start and saying, oh, it's never going to happen. Well, I mean, yeah, of course it's not going to happen if you tear it down right at the start, but if you can build up this movement of solidarity, some people will be able to hold to their principles, and the more people that can do that, the more we can push back against the Twitter mob losing people their livelihoods.
All right, well, maybe I just have no faith in capitalism, but a lot of these companies are pitted against each other, right? They're explicitly rivals. Mm-hmm. And one company losing means another company gains. And a lot of the performative wokeness that you see from these companies, which includes like firings and stuff, is strictly a matter of trying to extract the most money from people. And getting companies that are in the business of extracting the most money out of their customers and giving the least amount of money to their workers, getting those companies who are already doing that to make a principled stand that is not going to make them money, and in fact might lose them money. I don't know. Part of the reason that I favor, in some cases, censorship is I see these structural problems that have created all this stuff, and I want to fix the structural problems, right? If I could fix the structural problems and not have to do any censorship, right, that would be great. Mm-hmm. Failing that, there's real harm being done by some of this misinformation. that I want it to be stopped.
Yeah. I mean, I would also
It's-
like that harm to be stopped. I just fear the long-term consequences more.
Yeah. I guess what I will say to that is that we have had limitations on free speech in America for our entire existence, right? There's stuff that's brought in from English common law that, you do not have an absolute right to free speech. And I think that we have done a roughly okay, most of the time, job in finding the balance between liberty and safety, or liberty and the well-being of the people, right? I mean, I value liberty, but I'm a consequentialist, and if liberty is not providing the best outcomes in all circumstances, then in some cases it needs to be curtailed by some amount.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that we have, for the most part, done a really good job of it. I just think there was a very large shock to the system when social media came out, and the old regime is struggling to keep up. It feels a lot like when the printing press was invented and what that did to Europe. And I don't want to forget the things that history taught us in the past, to tie it back to the Less Wrong posts from earlier, by going back to a censorship model when there should be other ways to deal with the technology that will not lead us back to killing each other.
Yeah.
Can you expand on the analogy? I'm sorry, I don't want to interject.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, can you expand on the analogy between the introduction of the printing press and social media? Like, I get part of it, but it's not clear to me exactly what the implications are or what one should do to combat misinformation. Like, does that make sense? Like, what was done when the printing press came out to combat misinformation? I'm guessing nothing.
Right. Well, it took a while. So my understanding of history, and I will admit, first of all, that this is not an era that I have spent a huge amount of time in. But from my understanding, when the printing press came out, it became cheap and easy to distribute ideas far and wide, where before ideas didn't travel all that much. They went with traders and merchants, and there was some ability to prevent those things from contaminating a society too badly, whereas once the printing press came out, knowledge just exploded everywhere. And a lot of people started having a lot of new ideas which were threatening to other people, and they did not want these ideas to spread. Go ahead.
Do you want my alternate reading of history?
Sure, because the way I see it is that these people discovered that there is an intellectual contagion coming of things that are very wrong and will destroy society, and even worse, will damn your neighbor's souls to eternal torment forever, and this could not be allowed to happen, and that led to a lot of strife, and we eventually fixed that. But what is your alternate reading?
Okay, it is basically the printing press enabled the Reformation. Which was not, it was to some extent, new ideas coming in. But to a greater extent, it was a challenge to the existing institutions, right? It was giving voice to people who previously wouldn't have had a voice and who now were able to challenge the institutions that were around them, which in large part was the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. And the historical parallel then is these existing institutions of old media, right, are being challenged by new media who can now, through social media, call them out on their shit. That is how a lot of the people who are... No one's defending the Twitter mobs. Mm-hmm. Some people are defending the concept of cancellation in different forms, right? Most people won't defend, like, I don't know, doxing someone.
Whether you...
But...
Yeah.
But it's basically like, someone is sexist, right? Mm-hmm. And in the past, they would have just gotten away with that, right? The existing power structures were sufficient to allow all that behavior to happen, right? But then this freedom of information comes along, and suddenly a lot more people are able to have a voice. They're able to start talking, and they can start fighting back against these institutions that have victimized them or have been like the cause of their problems, like if there's a sexist workplace, now all that stuff can kind of come out into the open. And that's the analog to the Reformation and the invention of the printing press.
Well, I think
that's my alternate.
no,
that's my alternate take.
I think that's actually a very good take, but I think it's compatible because a lot of the killing after the initial Reformation was sects fighting each other over who has the correct interpretation, who has the right dogma. And it wasn't, I mean, the church was also a big part of it. They had their inquisitions and all, but much of the murder in Europe was between smaller local groups, and that is also analogous to how much of the fighting nowadays is between smaller groups who are more alike with each other than they are with the old media, and they often work more on tearing each other down than on fighting against the old media dinosaurs.
Oh yeah. It's I definitely believe the left will eat itself. Yeah. Especially, I mean, it happens on the right, especially with the rise of Trump, because just I don't know, they cannot keep together an administration.
I mean, on the
and people just get thrown under the bus at a moment's notice. I don't know, but I definitely do see it a lot, and with cancellation specifically, the people most affected by it are people on the left, right?
I mean, I don't know. My most notable examples are on the left because that is the side I'm on and the people I'm familiar with. I don't know, maybe it happens on the right too, and I just am not in those circles.
Well, structurally, I mean, there are a lot of people who are like internet personalities or new media personalities, and they make their money through Patreon or YouTube or whatever other monetization schemes there are. And if the left is going to cancel someone, the only people they have the power to cancel are the people who they are funding to some extent, right?
No, they can attack anyone's employer too.
They can attack your employer too, but how much your employer, knows or cares about that is kind of contingent on you, like, actually being in their camp. To some extent, it depends on what the specific accusations are, or what behavior is.
Right. Companies on the left aren't going to care
mob.
if the mob on the right attacks them, and companies on the right aren't going to care if the mob on the left attacks them. It's only when your actual demographic attacks you that it's an issue.
Yeah, and I mean, most companies aren't, on the left or right at all. They just want to make money.
Yeah.
There are very few companies that have such a strong ideological bent that they'll let that get in the way of their market. I mean, your market to an extent dictates what you have to do as a company, but it has been. It's one of the things that a lot of people say, especially on the left, about cancel culture, is that it primarily will affect people who, like, you are a consumer of, right? So the only people that you can have any impact on, like the only people you can have any impact on are people who you are supporting in some way. Unless you want to go specifically after their employer, and that's got a sketchy history of actually working, because a lot of employers just don't care, and like if they're public facing, it's a lot different than if they're,
I think like that used to be the case, and that's why I wasn't worried and didn't really say anything before. But over the past few years, it seems to be more and more the case that employers will drop someone for any sort of mob that comes for them, and that is one of the reasons that I am more worried now, and I actually do support things like the Harper letter.
Yeah, it depends on what the mob is coming for you for. And yeah, there's a strong pressure on companies to not do their own due process.
Yeah,
I think that's definitely a problem, right? The companies, they just love money, and if it's going to lose them money to hold on to an employee, they'll drop the employee, and it won't matter if the accusations turn out to be baseless.
And that's a bad thing, and we should take a stand against that.
Well, I mean, I want to take a stand against it. To me, taking a stand against it means going after Twitter itself, right?
Okay, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
I
agree.
don't
Twitter
think
must be destroyed.
Well, it's not even that Twitter needs to be destroyed. I think that Twitter could do more in terms of like algorithms, in terms of like trying to track trends, and like the mob can form so quickly, and it does this little telephone game of information and spreading misinformation. I don't know. It's a structural problem, not just for Twitter, for most social media. and to some extent even, the so-called old media, the old media has always sucked at it. Like they've always gone for things that are a little more inflammatory, right? They've always wanted to get people to buy their papers, and in order to stoke the flames. The only thing that has kept old media at bay for the most part is defamation and the risk of having a suit brought against you. But we have strong laws in terms of defamation, and it's usually pretty hard to go after the press, which is not the case in some other countries.
It's not really clear to me what your guys' crux is. Like, I mean, the Twitter mob example is too easy to be like a core intuition pump here. Like it sounds like I'm the Harper's letter, excuse me, doesn't seem to like. I mean, yes, a handful of intellectuals can take a public commitment to saying this is bad, and we won't like make the choice of this whatever the false choice between justice and freedom. Like that doesn't seem like a solution. Like if you own a small business and whatever, like Twitter accuses one of your employees of in 1983 writing a letter of what was then, I'm assuming, a fairly mainstream opinion. I'm thinking of that guy you mentioned that said that women shouldn't be in combat or something.
Yeah.
Like I think 40 years ago that was a pretty popular thought, and so for whatever reason, this guy got unlucky and somebody found that and whatever doxed him with his employer or something. Like, I mean, if you own the business and your town is saying we'll refuse to shop here until you fire that guy, you're like, well, then I'm going out of business because I'm principled. Like, no one's gonna do that. So, like, I even if you sign this letter, you'd be like, well, I also have to feed my family and have health insurance or whatever. So, like, I don't see how that's a solution. I don't think that I'm strongly in favor of the ideals of it, and like as individuals we should all make that choice. But like, I guess what I'm getting at is I'm not sure A, how that's a solution to any problem that's going on right now, and B, like what is being proposed that you have a disagreement with, like as far as solving the easy problem of Twitter mobs, or we can pivot to like a more general case.
Well, so and I'll let Alexander reply too, but my takeaway, my major takeaway was that I mentioned this on the Mind Killers. I was so surprised that the Harper's letter was even controversial that I didn't mention it on our episode when it first came out, because I thought, how could anyone disagree with this? But the thing is, Europe went through 100 years of war and murder over this conflict of ideas, and the solution they finally came up with was the liberal ideals, and specifically in this case, the ideal of freedom of speech, that anyone can say anything as long as they do not do direct, deliberate harm with it. You let people say what they want. Argument gets counter argument. It never gets a bullet. And this is, I mean, it's kind of unintuitive to humans in general, but it is a social norm. It took, like I said, almost a century of killing to get to this point, but it becomes a thing that society upholds. It is a principle that people have to stand by, even when it costs them personally, and it is how they solved this problem. And now it seems to me like some aspects of society have forgotten that, or don't care and want to change things. And I think it is very important to stay true to the ideal that you don't censor people, you don't try to silence them by threatening them with violence or threatening their families or threatening their employment, and you respect people's ability to speak even when what they're saying is bad and dangerous and will cause your children to go to hell, or will possibly endanger your children's health, because that is still better than the alternative of 100 years of warfare. And that is what I basically saw the Harper's letter as saying, that, hey guys, freedom of speech, remember this thing? It's a great thing. Let's all remember that it stays in place only due to principled people still holding to that and the social pressure to conform to that. And I was shocked when such a vast number of people were like, this letter is bullshit and terrible, and how dare people sign on to it.
Well, okay. So
And I know you didn't personally say that. Some people did. You were much more
yeah,
moderate, so I'm sorry I did not intend to
I,
paint you.
I'm much more moderate,
Yeah.
but I guess the way I see it is, let's say that you are trans, right? And you see J.K. Rowling, who has an enormous audience, and whose audience is not really because she has great ideas,
Right.
right? I mean, great political ideas, certainly. No one is following. Okay, I'm sure some people are, but for the most part, people follow J.K. Rowling on Twitter because she wrote a bunch of books that were important to their childhood,
Yeah.
or whatever, right? And they want to keep up on Harry Potter stuff. And so J.K. Rowling gets on gets on Twitter, and she uses her platform to say things like, well, I'm trying to not misquote her, but
One of the really bad ones that I think she should apologize for was when she said that the movement gives cover for violent predators.
yeah, well, J.K. Rowling's position is basically that trans women are not real women. They are predators who, are invading women's spaces, and trans men don't exist, and transition is basically conversion therapy, and a bunch of stuff like that.
I don't think that's
I
a
think-
fair
I think-
way to point out her position, but she's definitely trending in that direction.
Well, she did say specifically that transition was a form of conversion therapy. That one I know she
Okay.
said. I mean, you can certainly fact check me after. I'm not gonna.
I do remember something about conversion therapy in the post. I don't remember the details right now, but yeah.
We can trust
Yeah.
that no one will actually put in the legwork to fact check anybody because of the era we live in.
Yes, but I do for myself try to hold to the truth as closely as possible. I'm pretty sure that is a slightly uncharitable, and it puts all that stuff that was kind of spread out and tiptoed around in one place. But let's say you're a trans person and you see that. I think that your first instinct might be to say, okay, well, she can say that, and freedom of speech, and that's great. And then you think about whether that's going to change anyone's mind. And you don't have the platform that J.K. Rowling does, right?
Mm-hmm.
J.K. Rowling has so many. I don't have the numbers, but she has a lot of followers, right? And that is going to go out to everyone. And even if you reply to her in a tweet, maybe she'll block you. Maybe just no one sees it, right? And if it changes people's mind, then it's going to change, their perception of you personally. It's going to cause real, actual harm to you, especially if those people start, voting for people who are going to start taking away your medicine that you need for transition, or that are going to restrict what services are available to you from the state. And you look at that and you're like, well, why, am I going to selflessly give up aspects of my life? Am I going to allow this harm caused me by this speech that has actual real consequences in the real world, right? Or am I going to just sit there and stand by free speech? And for me, it's the same thing with the anti-vax stuff, right? It's if it were just speech, I'd be fine with it. But it's not just speech. It's people vaccinating their kids. And my son possibly getting a disease because of that speech. And I think that applies to a lot of these things. A lot of these things where people are upset about what others have said, and why, cancellation is basically the only recourse if you think that talking isn't going to work. And talking, obviously, cancellation feels good for those people, right? I've never canceled anyone, but I imagine that it probably feels good to just be like, hey, fuck that guy for all this stuff that he said that is going to do, is going to negatively impact me. He hates me. And, cancellation probably feels good. I think it's also easier than dialogue, which is what attracts people to it. But when people are kind of iffy on free speech, or the totality of free speech, I think that's where they're coming from. I think they're thinking about in the real world. I think especially for LGBT people, that's they're thinking about how things used to be, where it used to be that there would be people who would hang out outside gay nightclubs with their cameras, and they would take covert pictures of people coming out of these nightclubs, and then they would send it to these people's employers, and now to be asked to show leniency and understanding to these people who showed no leniency and understanding, who, and we've said that, free speech has done fairly well. It's got a checkered history. McCarthyism definitely happened. There have been a lot of instances of people acting out against employers. That, like, cancel culture, not only is it not just the left, it's also not new. It's been going on for a long time. That people's jobs have been lost for things that they said. It's just now so many people have their history discoverable that it's getting to be a bigger problem.
And it was
Galileo got canceled.
Yeah, but it was always a bad thing the whole time it was happening.
Yeah, no, it was always a bad thing.
Yeah, it didn't start becoming good now just because the targets are the quote-unquote right targets.
No, I just think that a lot of people who argue, a lot of the argument that is made from a position of why would we not use these tools, right? I think saying, we got to be better than our enemies is true, but
okay, thank you. I would like to say the reason that we don't want to use these tools is, like, first of all, I do still think that J.K. Rowling was slightly misrepresented to you. Like, she didn't say, from my recollection, that trans people are predators. The thing she said was that the movement gives cover to predators, which is a slightly different thing. It's still bad. Like I said, this is something I think she should apologize for, because it's just not the case, and it is highly inflammatory, and, like you said, could hurt people. But my problem isn't with people necessarily saying J.K. Rowling is awful. It's the fact that if J.K. Rowling signed the Harper's letter, now no one else can sign the Harper's letter, or they are in jeopardy of being canceled. It is that sort of thing. Like, I know I've made this example before, but if Hitler himself signed the Harper's letter, I still think the Harper's letter principles are correct and true, and I would still sign it, even though I am not for the extermination of Jews at all, or any other minority group. And that's the sort of thing you see. People don't have the power to cancel J.K. Rowling directly, so they go after anyone who could be slightly associated with her to create a culture of fear, so that no one dares say anything that might be construed as remotely positive of Rowling, or to be supporting something that Rowling might also support. It's like a really horrible, chilling, terrorizing effect to have these people out there ready to cancel anyone who might have been near someone who said something that is cancelable. I think most recently, I love Natalie Wynn. I watch all the ContraPoints videos as they come out. Not always the same day they come out, because they're fucking long, but usually within a week or so. And she got canceled not too long ago because she had Buck Angel as a voice actor to read one line for her. And Buck Angel is a trans man, porn star, as like 40-ish years old now, super active in the gay community and the trans community over his years, fighting for gay and trans rights. And Buck Angel is currently canceled because he has some opinions about the trans-trenders, as they are sometimes referred to. The idea that some people are transitioning not because they're genuinely gender dysphoric, but more because it's a status move and all their friends are doing it and whatever. I don't know. I don't really have an opinion on that, but Buck Angel, huge in the gay and trans rights community, got canceled, and then Natalie Wynn, trans woman, had him do a voice for her, like one-line voice, because he was such a big figure in the trans rights community, and now she was canceled for having that association with him. And it's this sort of thing that I think is not just lunacy, but like outright dangerous, that makes everyone terrified to say anything or to be associated with anyone who might have ever said anything.
I think to some extent it's kind of like the war on terror, where terrorism was not, forgive me for saying this, terrorism was not a big deal. Right? It didn't actually kill that many people. And now there's like this culture of fear, and the culture of fear is worse than the actual thing that happened.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I don't know. Also, ContraPoints has been canceled like 3 or 4 times.
It's a thing.
A lot of people, Peter Coffin, a YouTuber and is not as big, but he's talked about, he's been canceled like 6 or 7 times, and it's tough to deal with the harassment that you get for just saying what you thought. And it's like, come on, we're on like nominally the same side. Why are you even doing this? It's not going to change my mind. It's just going to piss me off. And like, cancellation doesn't help anyone, right?
Can I get
it's
can I
not
get a
a good
definition then of
tactic.
what it means to be canceled? Like, if J.K. Rowling's canceled, like, she still has Twitter, her books are still available. If this one person, this YouTuber, has been canceled 4 times, like, what does it even mean?
Right. That's the other problem. Is basically it just means that people are, in some sense, the soft version is basically just a boycott, right? You are declaring that you are boycotting someone because you don't agree with the things they said and you don't want to financially support
And that would be
right?
fine.
The hard version of canceling is going after a person's. Well, it's difficult because boycotting is going after someone's employment in a sense. It's just a matter of like intent then, right? But yeah, going to someone's employer and saying, hey, you got to fire this guy, or going to advertisers and saying, hey, if you don't, drop your sponsorship of this person, I'm not going to buy any more stuff, right? That's usually what it is. Sometimes it goes further to, oh man,
Like when it's really bad is when anyone who is associated with you starts to get boycotted and get the same employer harassment and those things. Like it is
Yeah.
at its worst. It is the attempt to make someone socially toxic, so everyone else will have to cut them out of their lives or suffer the same fate as well.
Yeah, and usually that does not work. Usually that does not, like, you have to be, I don't know. The fact that a lot of people get canceled so many times and it just never sticks, and J.K. Rowling can't be canceled, right?
But it still puts
People are making attempts.
It still puts
but,
all that person's friends like through a lot of stress. Like your life gets bad for
I'm not arguing that. I'm not arguing that these tactics are
there.
good.
Yeah,
But I don't know. I at times feel like it's overblown because so many people just get canceled and then are fine. The real danger is if you are very, very small.
yeah.
But that's like public shaming, right?
Well, but
that's
the
not.
problem is like the rich and the powerful never have that huge of a problem because they're already rich and powerful. The problem is like when Andrew Sullivan gets kicked off of what, the New York Magazine, was it, or the New Yorker? I don't remember the exact name right now. He's gonna be fine. He's already rich. He's already famous. He has book deals. It's all the people in their early to mid 20s who are working there. They just started their careers. They're trying to make it big in journalism, which is already a dying industry that it's really hard to make it in. And they see this thing happen, and they just shut the fuck up if they have any opinions that aren't towing the orthodoxy of whoever's leading the cancel mobs. And that, I think, is genuinely harmful.
I don't even think that the cancel mobs necessarily have an orthodoxy. I think they're just.
I think there's some
they're just
things
pissed
you
off.
can absolutely say as orthodoxy, that cis white people are fair game for anything, that trans people and racial minorities are what's the term here? They to be protected is not the right term. They're almost fetishized.
Yeah, I mostly just think that the mob is not like an intelligent thing.
Yeah, but the
It's
mob
just
knows what's going
a
on.
lot of the pile-on is not like ooh, that's like, we're making a principled stand here.
No.
It's principle. It feels like a principled stand. It feels good to attack people.
But the mob has an intuitive sense of who they can victimize next, and if you watch them, you can tell, some of the signs.
Well, I mean, the mob puts out feelers,
Yeah.
right? It's if they're a flock of birds, you have some birds that fly like at the edge of the flock and then get brought back in because it didn't work. I think a lot of it needs to be analyzed in terms of how mobs function and how mobs dispense justice, right? Like, and I think yeah, there's usually some ideological underpinning at some point, but most of it is just like 3 minutes hate or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just that gathering of hatred toward what may or may not be an acceptable target.
And by the
And
next
it's
day,
not actually about the object level thing so much as it is about the emotional feeling.
right?
I do have. I'm sorry. I was just going to say that I appreciated that, Alexander. You gave me. I've been looking around for a while for like what is meant by the word harm in cases where like that tweet harms people, and like the intuitive sense of harm is swinging a fist at somebody, and the layout you gave of the rolling tweet storm was the first articulate example that actually drove the point home for me. So thanks for that. I had the thought immediately after you said it, forgot it, then remembered it again, and I knew I was going to let it slip if I didn't get it out. So
I guess now we seem to be, or at least I sort of feel like I'm just talking about like, the kids and their counseling these days, and I don't want to be that guy. I am very much in favor of freedom of speech, even if it has some harmful effects, because I think on net it's good. And that was the main thing, I guess, I came to say, because you seem to be more about censorship is good and justified sometimes.
yeah, the other thing I wanted to kind of drive us back to was like I don't think anyone here loves Twitter mobs, like, and no one here really loves cancel culture to the extent that it's an actual problem that actually affects people. Like, no, I don't. I mean, I don't want to put words in either of your mouths, but I think that no one's on here saying yes. That guy who wrote that thing in 1983 should have been fired. Like, none of us are that. So like I was more interested in like what proposed solutions we would have to solve like misinformation problems. And there was an interesting the thing you sent over earlier about truth maybe not being the best weapon here. I thought that was really interesting, and if we have time I definitely want to hit that.
Yeah. I guess for me,
Yeah, I mean, everyone finish up the thoughts they were having on this. I don't want to like say, all right, conversation over, but I don't know how like
that you'll find a resolution. I don't think there's really a resolution to this because it's a difficult problem. I think that, I mean, we have limits on free speech already, right? We have some degree of censorship already. It's just a question of degree and in what circumstances it's appropriate, right? I mean, I know a lot of free speech absolutists. They're very common online. But my experience being a moderator for communities is that there's a lot of stuff that you can allow some amount of disutility to happen if you just do absolutist free speech, because a lot of people will just come in and be a net negative on your community. Yeah. And there's certain elements of speech that can be a net negative on a community, and it's a problem that can have different solutions to it. And I do think due process is, good and a thing to be strived for. I don't think you can really. It's hard. I'm struggling to think of a legislative framework that you could introduce that for what's essentially a social problem.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is measuring the cost versus the benefits. Like, kicking someone off of Discord does not have a lot of cost to their personal lives. They're not going to lose their jobs or their families, whereas going after their job may lose them their job. So their sin would have had to have been far greater to justify doing that sort of thing to someone. Like, why would Scott Alexander getting doxxed by the New York Times? There was no justification for that.
Well, I mean, they had a justification. It just wasn't a very good one. Yeah, no, and that's not even, that wasn't even a case of, presumably that was not a case of them like attempting to cancel him. It was just
presumably.
Speaking of, his posts are back on his website as of a couple days ago.
Yep, he's coming back.
Hell yeah.
I think the New Yorker put out a piece on it, and then the New York Times piece is probably not going to run because of that.
Yeah, I think we talked about the New Yorker piece episode or two ago. All time is fuzzy now, but we just hadn't mentioned that yet, that SSC was back up, and that's exciting.
Yeah.
Like, so it seems to me like one interim proposed like avenue to at least making things less shitty I don't know what this would do to like fight the cancel mob, but like I mean, I have a very like small amount of concern for that. Like not just because I'm too small of a target for anyone to give a shit about, but like it doesn't seem to work on a lot of big figures, and it doesn't go after a lot of small figures. So like it's bad, but it's not like uh, as far as like where can I direct my effort? Like before we started talking, we were talking about effective altruism, right? Like effective effort here. I don't feel like the best use of my time is fighting cancel culture because it's not like the world's biggest problem, but like misinformation is, like on the subject, it's not the biggest problem, but it's a bigger problem. And so like, if Twitter had smarter bots that flagged more content, and they're like, hey, we noticed you put out a tweet about the aggression or the violent aggression rates of trans women or something. Here are the actual statistics on that. And it had that same sort of badge that it has for Trump tweeting about Kung Flu, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a not bad thing to do. It's not censorship. The tweet stays up. It's to be 1,000% clear again, because you don't know me very well, Alexander. I don't call it Kung Flu. I was making fun of the president. So
Yeah.
I think that might be the way to go there. Not to let anyone, I guess not to just force the conversation there, but like as far as fighting misinformation, it doesn't seem like truth has the stopping power that we'd like it to have, at least not in the medium term. Like, I don't have current numbers on anti-vaxxers, although I do have approximate estimations on the number of kids getting, measles and shit, which is more than it was 10 years ago when I last looked into this sort of thing. So I'm guessing anti-vaxxing is at least as much, if not more of a problem than ever, despite the truth telling them, hey, you guys are wrong. And do you have like alternate proposals for how to deal with general misinformation? Or am I pivoting us way too hard?
Me or Alex? Or
Alex, because Alexander,
No,
just because it was in the an email talking about how like you had said that truth might offer an asymmetry, but the bigger asymmetries are on the side of lies, which can maximize for emotional impact far better than the truth can, and like that's true.
Yeah. And the anti-vax stuff especially is a lot of its emotional appeal, especially for autism. People want to have an explanation for why their kid is autistic, and they want it to be someone's fault. That's one of the things that's very appealing about the anti-vax stuff from an emotional standpoint, right? Obviously not true, but that's where it's come from. As far as remedies go, the government is very, very slow. I wouldn't want a government solution for any of these problems, basically. I think these are all structural problems, right? Cancel culture is a structural problem. The mob is created by the structure that the mob sits within. And, to some extent, human nature, right? It's humans driving that. It's human nature driving it rather than humans themselves. And the misinformation stuff is also, to my mind, structural. It is a society that has sort of blurred the line between information and entertainment, and promoted a lot of people who just basically don't care about the truth whatsoever. Oprah being one of them, right? And have no consequences whatsoever for spreading information. And the solution for structural problems, it has to be a structural solution, right? You need to change the underlying issues. Most of it is just capitalism, honestly. It is inherent problems to capitalism that have sort of run away, and I'm not saying socialism is the answer, but
What do you have like vague outline ideas of possible solutions?
I mean, you can increase the laws. You can make defamation laws more strict or with higher degrees of liability. Like I said, the United States is among the countries with the weakest defamation laws in the world. So, like, the standards for defamation are extremely high, especially if you're a public figure, right? And a lot of the problem with these Twitter mobs is that they're just spreading lies, right? And there's no consequence whatsoever, right? could lie about someone on Twitter, and Twitter's, first of all, not going to do anything about it. Partly for a lot of these platforms, it's because doing anything about it would require artificial intelligence of some kind. Like what, probably a weak one to go look through and just be like, hey, that's actually not true. And like, we know it's not true, and it's not like a corner case. It's not like a matter of arguing opinion. It's just false. It's a hoax or whatever, or it's a misquote. The problem from a lot of these social media platforms is that to do any kind of fact checking at all is so burdensome that they would not be able to stay in business at the moment, right? So you could have technological solutions to this where the open discourse would still happen. There would be no censorship whatsoever, right? Or only to a marginal extent, but the open discourse would still happen. It's just that you would have artificial intelligence that was arguing on the side of truth, right? To keep truth at least somewhat in the mix, instead of just an echo chamber of misinformation and lies. The problem is, if you can do that, then you can set up the opposite, right? You could set up bots that will argue any position, which I think is a more substantial danger than censorship, personally. But like, other proposed solutions, I think that the platforms can do more in terms of at least slowing the velocity of the mob. Like, if you can see the mob forming and make some effort to disperse it, or make some effort to protect against it, a lot of it's just going to come in the form of norms, and I think a lot of those norms are going to be in terms of people protecting their own identity more. Like, I can't imagine starting out on the internet today as opposed to like late 90s when I first got on the internet, and maintaining a persistent identity like I have now, that where like doxing me is not, not even remotely difficult. But I also live my life not putting anything on the internet that I wouldn't want read in court. So I think that kind of norm is going to probably come up a lot more, and I think that that's a chilling effect of the cancel mobs, right? I would hope that to some extent people will start changing their own behaviors to prevent misinformation, but I think that has to start with better education and better critical thinking, and I just don't know how you get that to happen, because it feels like we've been on a backwards track, at least in America, for the last couple decades.
I actually strongly agree with you on the whole better education kind of thing. The whole raising the sanity waterline thing would solve so many problems.
Yeah.
It's just hard to do.
It's hard to do, yeah. I don't know. I think automated tools are probably going to come around. I know Twitter's been doing a lot more to try to do its part to not be a toxic cesspit. They don't do enough, but they've been starting to try. Google's been starting to try, to just be like, okay, we do have some responsibility for our algorithm, and to not just put out an algorithm that will push people in whatever direction will get the most engagement, right? I think that's one of the things that a lot of social media companies have been doing that's been incredibly toxic.
Yeah, it's promoting engagement.
They built these. Yeah, they built these algorithms, and then it was just sort of the unintended consequences of that.
Because the most engaging thing is the thing that outrages you and sends you on a crazy rant. The most engaging thing is getting triggered.
Yeah, and a lot of it is just, these seductive lies being told that you are special, and the only reason you didn't make it, or the only reason you don't have a perfectly fulfilling life, is that someone took it away from you, and how dare they. I think that for a lot of people, especially maybe not necessarily my age, but younger, growing up in the world that they're growing up into, a lot of that, there's a lot of attempt to take this disillusionment and turn it into an oppression fantasy, in some sense.
If something's not fair, it's somebody's fault.
Yeah, if something's not fair, it's somebody's fault, and this is not about you. This is you've been wronged, and you should hate people, because that's and then it feels good to hate people. I know some people don't feel that way. Like, I've gotten pushback on that when I say, like, sometimes it feels good to just feel that
as
hate.
someone who is very, very much into revenge fiction, hate can feel awesome. Especially when you get to, see that hate fulfilled by having the objects, the people that wronged you destroyed for it.
So I mean, like anyone who says that hate doesn't feel good. I mean, like I don't have hate in my real life. I don't have I'm the kind of person who doesn't have the want or temperament for that. But I mean, if anyone says, "Oh no, that's a terrible thing," they've never seen and enjoyed John Wick.
Exactly.
Right?
Not
like,
to generalize from fictional evidence, but you want to see people who killed his dog die.
Exactly. So this isn't generalizing like truth from fictional evidence. This is just generalizing like an emotion, or not generalizing. This is internalizing. This is synthesizing an emotion that you don't have to go through it yourself. But like the only thing that makes his dog being murdered in the beginning of that movie okay is how many people die because of it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And like that feels great. It's I that was my sidebar there, just to relate that.
So I think that the algorithms cause a lot of this problem, and then the base structures aside from the algorithms also cause a lot of these problems, and that changing the platforms would help a lot with various different aspects of these structural problems, which includes Twitter mobs and includes just disinformation campaigns and real harm that's being done to people. The problem is,
do you think
it depends? I think to some extent on altruism.
Yeah,
right?
I was about to say, do you think that principles can count as a structural change, like a principle to not attack someone's family? I mean, I want to say even the mob. I don't know if this is actually true, if this is just Hollywood stuff that I've seen in movies, but even the mob has rules against attacking the family members of people in rival gangs, right? Like, there are some principles that we can hold each other to, and if that was really codified deep into a society's cultural DNA, is that not a systemic change, or are you talking specifically about
no,
tech?
I think it can be. No, I think it can be. I think it's just way more difficult. I guess the way I see it is that there's this meme of not attacking, or this norm that you need to install, and if it were easy to install norms into a society that's like already running and doing its own thing, I think you'd see that a lot more. And I think historically, when new ideas and new norms have been installed into society, it's been always accompanied by bloodshed of one kind or another, right? Like, I think about revolutions and how rare it is to get one that's even relatively bloodless. I don't know.
I think this is one of the reasons I feel strongly about some of the principles needing to be stuck to, because they are hard to both instill and to keep around afterwards, but it's much harder to instill them in the first place, so I don't want to see them destroyed. And so I worry maybe overmuch, like maybe some level of greater change is needed.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. From my perspective, I'm worried about a lot of the same things. I'm worried about a destruction of norms.
And God, talking about destruction of norms, if the last 4 years haven't been just a bloodbath of norms.
Right. That most of my worry about the destruction of norms comes from the right rather than the left. And I think a lot of when we talk about Harper's letter, it seems to me to be directed at the left, specifically because a lot of it seems like it's a defense of some people who are in institutions that are just being protected because they've been there, I guess. I don't know. I see a lot of the cancel culture. I am sympathetic to it as coming out of this place of people who have not previously been able to air their grievances, or who have been able to air their grievances, but just no one listens and nothing happens, like the Me Too stuff. I think that's on balance been good. I think a lot of people got caught up in that did not deserve it.
It started in a good place.
It started in a good place, and I think,
Bill Cosby
overall,
got canceled, right?
Yeah, he did get canceled.
And I mean, I think that's
By
one
canceled,
that.
do you mean sent to jail for rape?
Yeah.
Well,
But
I mean,
like this might not have happened without the mob. Like this was like his misconduct, if you want to call it that, was an open secret for, if not decades, at least years before fuck all got done about it. And it wasn't until this thing sort of took off online that enough traction got underneath it to finally bring this down, right?
yeah, and I think that's been a way for a lot of these cases, and I think people do get overzealous, and then they enjoy taking down powerful people who need to be taken down, and then they keep looking for targets. I think that has been the case for every movement ever that they, it is a very rare movement that has accomplished their goal and then just shut down and said, hey, we did our part.
Yeah. You start with Louis XIV and you keep going until you get to you.
To make it perfectly clear, I wasn't like endorsing cancel culture. I was just bringing up like a I always like finding just like the contrary example of like, well, look, here's a good outcome of it.
Yeah. And Harvey Weinstein deserved that shit like a motherfucker.
Right.
Yeah.
And this.
Yeah. No, there were a lot of people who, a lot of it had to be in the court of public opinion because the actual courts take more than, 4 witnesses, right? Of separate events that are years apart. Like to actually know, the standards of proof in court are higher, and I think especially for public opinion, they should be a little lower. I don't think they should be so low as they are now, but I don't know. I think having a reckoning for some of these people has been a good thing, and I think to some extent, when you have people like J.K. Rowling, who are talking shit, basically, I think it'd be good for it to be the norm to just at least have a little bit more empathy for other people than she has shown.
Absolutely.
And that is my ideal outcome. I don't think that's a real outcome. I think a lot of people are just going to be quiet when they think things, and I don't know. Maybe that some good will come out of that of people just like not saying their bigoted stuff that they think, like that might be good for that to be the norm. But it's hard to not see that chilling effect on speech and be a little worried. I think I do agree with that. I think I see that and agree with it. But I don't know. At the same time, it's just like, I'm so glad that I'm white. I'm so glad that I'm male, that I've never had to deal with, like, deal with, like, going down the street and have a cop see me and I get, like, anxious or defensive because, I don't know what might happen. That's never been a concern of mine, right?
A decent way to simulate that might be to be, like, deliberately breaking the law. Like, seriously, walk down the street with a Ziploc bag full of cocaine in your pocket.
Holy shit.
And then like, again, you're not doing anything. But then you see a cop car drive by, and that panic you get might actually simulate what it's like to not have the luxury of being pretty sure the cops won't bug you. I guess you still have the low prior factor of like, well, they're not going to stop you because you're white and stuff. But like the fact, like just what you said, just like if you're on the wrong side of the law, whether because you're committing a crime or because the law hates you for no good reason, they can both kind of get that sense of panic. I had this last thought I wanted to say about the mob kind of continuing going, and in the cases of like Weinstein and Cosby, the mob, we don't call it the mob because they did the right thing, but we were talking about like hate feels good. I think some people, and you mentioned every revolution just keeps going. Like those people who enjoyed the fight, if you want to call it that, and they will keep finding targets because they love that so much, right? I just thought that callback is the only thing I could find to say, and I think my contributions are waning, even though they weren't that strong to begin with.
Well, the one thing I do want to bring it back to is that Less Wrong post, which was making history available, right? I was thinking about that a lot in the context of like race and gender, and I don't think it's how he meant it, but when people say check your privilege, like there's a lot of that sentiment in that post where he's talking about just like think about what it would feel like to have actually been, like, living under Jim Crow, right? Or, I don't know. I think about that a lot in the context of especially the cancel culture type stuff, as far as, because I don't know, none of it really affects me very much. I don't have any skin in the game. I make money through writing, which makes me more, at the same time, more and less susceptible to ever being canceled. But, like, that's not my core audience of the people who are gonna, like, oh man, he said something that was politically unorthodox. I don't, that's not really the audience that I have. But I try to think about what it feels like to kind of live in one of these work cultures that is toxic, and it's a bunch of little things and they just build up over time, and you can't really assemble evidence unless you want to start making a spreadsheet of every single time that you felt demeaned, and no one actually does that because that would be kind of itself toxic, right?
That would be dwelling on all the bad shit, and some people do that, but it sucks.
Yeah, and well, some of it you don't even know, right? You don't know whether it was a comment about your gender or about your race or anything like that. You don't know if it actually was intended as that, or if you're reading into it or whatever. And then I also do think, that fear of, oh man, I said some stuff that I realize now is wrong, but I'm not going to get any clemency for it. I'm going to have to weather this storm of public shame for something I don't even agree with anymore, Yeah. Although a lot of the people, like Kevin Hart, got canceled in the sense that he's makes millions of dollars and is still a well-known comedian. He got quote unquote canceled, right?
I'm not familiar with Kevin Hart. What happened?
He made a joke. He made a joke that was basically he would kill his son if his son was gay.
So I laughed already because I'm assuming he did not mean this seriously, right?
Okay.
Like, it's a Louis C.K. kind of thing, right?
Let me see if I can find the tweet. No, I can't find it. But it was basically a joke, but it wasn't like...
It fell very flat, and it was a very dicey subject for a fall flat joke. It was like the woman who said that she wasn't going to get AIDS in Africa, right?
Yeah. Which was a funny story, because she made that tweet and then got on an airplane and missed the whole Twitter storm.
Yeah, and then 8 hours later she finds out she doesn't have a job or any friends anymore when she lands.
Yeah. But yeah, Kevin Hart was one of those examples where it was something about, killing his gay son or something, and people were like, wow, this is not funny and also super homophobic. And then he didn't apologize for it, which made the whole thing kind of like, okay, so this isn't a thing where you're where you don't agree with it anymore. You're just people are being too sensitive and whatever. That happens a lot. There's a book that's I would recommend called "So You've Been Publicly Shamed."
I've heard of it. Did you read it?
It's pretty. Yeah. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's quite old now, I think. I mean, in internet years,
right.
But
it's about 16 months old.
Yeah. But it's sort of a bunch of issues that, I guess it's 2015. That's recent, right? But a lot of it is about the more general issues of cancel culture and how people should respond to it if they want to weather the storm.
I think it's...
And I think...
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
I think that one of the norms that I would like, that I actually think can be changed, is for people to understand the PR position of, how to deliver... How to acknowledge that you're not a perfect person or whatever, Because I think that's one of the things that actually does defuse the cancel mob. And I think probably after your fourth time trying to cancel ContraPoints, maybe you start to get the idea that it's not going to work and you should stop doing it.
Has it really been that many times?
I think I know of at least 3. I'm fuzzy on the third. There was one where she had a tweet that was like, I don't even want to. Sorry,
okay,
it was
right,
dumb.
Okay.
It was dumb Twitter
Gotcha.
stuff.
Right. Twitter is Twitter.
The Kevin Hart
is.
thing. Yeah, the Kevin Hart thing was beyond Twitter, because it was that was not just a Twitter mob, because it was it extended into old media as well. But yeah, but yeah, there are a lot of people who get canceled. Just they keep on going, and they are negatively affected in that they get a lot of harassment, and maybe they lose some subscribers or some income or whatever. A lot of the people who get canceled are public facing, right? Like as a software engineer, I did practically nothing that was public facing, right? So the more public facing you are, the more risk there is that someone will take issue with you, especially if you're a more extreme personality. But I don't know. That's kind of off track.
So we've been going for almost 2 hours. Actually, no, over 2 hours. I'm sorry. And I wanted to kind of bring it to an end. Is there like final points, things that you would like to cover that we didn't get to, or things you'd like to reply to?
No, I'm fine. My only point is that I'm a structuralist.
Okay.
I'm a structuralist and a consequentialist. I think censorship gets a bad rap.
All right.
Specifically because of the slippery slope, which I don't know if it's actually that slippery.
Okay.
That is the summary of my opinion. We didn't need to spend 2 hours on it.
Well, I mean, I had a good time though, and I not only did I enjoy talking to you, I feel like it helped iron out a lot of things that I was confused about. I feel like we are not as different in opinion as I thought we were before we started this.
I think we mostly agree on the problems and not necessarily the solutions.
Yeah, I am much more on the side of, we shouldn't stop anyone talking, but we should definitely start to put up some sort of structure for people to oppose the censorship and feel like they can do it without losing everything, I guess. Embolden the employers, because we're on the side of big business and landlords.
No, I mean, as basically a listener to this episode, I had fun with it. So I think that, like, there seems to be less daylight between your guys' positions than maybe it seems like you guys, when you're starting out. I do get, I don't want to say, and now we all agree. But yeah, like, the problems are problems, and the proposed solutions are myriad, and I don't have anything else to say apparently. So
Cool.
I really enjoyed, like I said, mostly listening to this, and I thought this was a lot of fun. So once again, at least for me, thanks Alexander for coming on and doing this with us.
Yeah, for sure. I had a good time.
And everybody, you have just heard how intelligent and thoughtful and kind Alexander is. His fiction is the same way. It's really good stuff. If you like the kind of intelligent and kind of stuff, read his things. Specifically, right now, Worth the Candle is what is in progress.
And if you're somehow listening to this and haven't read Metropolitan Man, which isn't a 1.3 million word investment, I think it's like it is my favorite point to example of like rationalist fiction. Not necessarily like my favorite work ever, but it's definitely got to be top 3 rationalist fiction, probably top 2, tied for first with Methods of Rationality. But it's my favorite to direct people towards because it's way more consumable, and if like a lot of people are turned off from Methods because they don't like Harry. You don't run into that problem with Lex Luthor. You're not supposed to love him as a person. You're supposed to love, like, oh my god, he is the best villain ever. And the best villain ever is the one who has really good points. And I don't know if we mentioned this when you were on before, but basically your point was so good that they stole it for Batman versus Superman. Which was, the whole thing with that where he 100% flip-flops his position for no reason by the second movie. He has a line the exact opposite of Lex Luthor's, which was stolen from your book, I'm convinced. In the first one where he says, like, if there's a 1% chance that, he will turn on the world, we need to take that. He says we need to take it as a certainty, which is not how Lex would have put it. But then in the second, in whatever, Dawn of Justice, he says if there's 1% chance that this will work, we need to take it as a certainty or something. And I'm like, you're reversing your argument. There's a 99% chance you could unleash Dark Superman. Like, what are you doing? But the movies were a disaster. But my point is, they were good, and your book was good enough to inspire Hollywood movies, whether they'll admit it or not. So,
yeah. Metropolitan Man is actually like 6 or 7 years old. It's astonishing to me to think that, because it seems like, I don't know, it does not seem that old. But yeah, it actually, when did Man of Steel come out? I think it might have preceded Man of Steel.
internet years.
Oh, same year.
Oh, nice.
Same year.
In internet years, though, that's a really long time.
Yeah. In internet years, that's very, very long. So
Yeah, if you would like a smaller, easier to consume sample of Alexander before you commit to something huge, Metropolitan Man is great. Great sampler.
Yep.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for joining us. We should thank our patron before we call it a night.
Of course, we can't call it a night without thanking our patrons who keep the lights on around here and make this show possible. This show is possible only because of listeners like you. And by you, I mean explicitly Mars Olivia.
Thank you, Mars. You make this possible. You let us speak to Alexander Wales and broadcast it to everyone. So you have helped have speech promulgate across the internet.
Yes, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
The debate will continue because of your contribution.
Awesome. Well, I think that's it then for this episode. We'll see you guys back in a couple of weeks for more Bayesian Conspiracy.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you again, Alexander.
Yep. Thanks.
Night.
Thanks again.
One quick piece of listener feedback that I remembered just at the last minute. A person in the Discord said that I should come with sources available if I am going to cite conspiracy theory type material in the podcast. And what they were referring to was my statement that the CDC used really inflated numbers for flu deaths, and it came around to bite them in the butt when COVID happened, because people could say COVID was only twice as bad as the flu when they were using COVID actual deaths versus the flu maximum estimated number. And I first of all want to say that I don't really think that's conspiracy theory stuff, because it seems like a pretty normal claim for me to say that a agency could use the highest end estimate of a death for, purposes of the public good, and then it comes around to bite them in the butt. But I admit I did not have them in front of me at the time. The sources that I have were linked on our website, thebayesianconspiracy.com, so people can go there to look them up if they want to. They include a letter from the Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which made this assertion that the flu deaths were inflated at least 5 times higher than what they actually are, and also the Journal for the American Medical Association. So both saying basically the same thing. So both, reputable sources that have linked documents on our website. So there you go. Actual source. I was not trying to do conspiracy theory shit.
Didn't we also put that in the episode description?
Yeah, it's in the episode description too. It was just I didn't cite what they were from directly in the episode, and that was considered a foul on my part. I don't know.
I don't know who called you out for that, or like how generalizable this is, because now we're running pretty late, but like some of my thoughts aren't 100% in order. But like I feel like it's okay to say I read this somewhere, I can't remember the name of the book, and then drop the book, as a in the show notes. Like I don't think it's fair to say you didn't come with sources if you don't click the show notes or the go to the website for the whatever it is you're listening to see if it's on there. If like you're just saying shit and you don't back it up, then that's really annoying. But if you can't back it up in real time on the air as it comes up impromptu, that I don't think should prohibit you from saying it.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is the reason we have show notes, right? In order to put these linking documents in, and we don't have to stop a voice conversation right in the middle to do searches.
Friendly reminder, we have show notes for every
Yes.
episode. In the show notes, you can find a link to our Discord where this piece of feedback came in, and usually follow-up stuff on things that we discussed in the episode. So like, we mentioned the Harper's letter, and like we didn't read it on here, but we also didn't like give you a URL to find it, but you can click a URL in the show notes and read it there.
Exactly. So you can always find that at thebayesianconspiracy.com or in the show notes.
Perfect. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what like Apple's podcast app does these days, but my podcast app of choice on iPhone is Overcast. Is that what it's called? That doesn't
I don't know
sound
what you
right.
use.
Well, I know, but that doesn't sound
Thinking
right.
out loud.
Yes. Well, so I can't cite that because I can't remember. So I think it's Overcast. That sounds right.
There will be a link to your podcatcher in the show notes.
Now I have to find it. like you just swipe right from like the little play window, and it takes you to the show notes and an embedded thing inside the player. And from there, you can open it. And it doesn't even take you to an external browser. You can open it while not leaving your apps. So,
Nice.
yeah, it's the future, guys. Tech is tight.
All right, that's all I had. So thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. And for anyone listening and is confused where Alexander went, this was brought up like immediately after we ended the episode, and he was like, "All right, well, wait." After we wrapped up with him, and then Enosh was like, "Oh, I had a piece of feedback," so we just jumped back on for that. So, actually, this is the second week in a row we've done that, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, or second episode in a row.
Yeah.
Let's see how long we keep the trend running of post-show content. Alrighty, everyone.
All right,
We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Bye.